but accepted. Evidence and testimony presented to the grand jury showed officers failed to report Basaggio's excessive use of force, which went on for several minutes without intervention from two other officers who was on the scene. Body-worn camera footage showed the involved officers laughing about the incident and intentionally avoiding discussing it on their body-worn camera. Statements made by other officers at the scene suggest that officers were aware that the use of force that night was excessive, and still they did nothing. The grand jury found this culture of non-reporting extended to Basaggio's punishment, which was limited to a single day off without pay, and labeled merely as a, quote, failure to obey policies, thus avoiding mandatory reporting to the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission, the agency responsible for maintaining ethical standards in law enforcement. The grand jury went on to say it lacks confidence in the Kissimmee Police Department's command staff and has requested the city conduct a thorough evaluation of that group. The grand jury found that despite clear evidence of misconduct in Officer Basaggio's use of force incident, that former Chief Holland chose not to criminally investigate the incident initially and failed to report Basaggio's department policy violations to the appropriate agencies, including the Office of the State Attorney. In fact, the State Attorney's Office only learned about Basaggio's unlawful use of force after watching a news report on TV, after which we repeatedly requested the Kissimmee Police Department request a criminal investigation into the matter. The grand jury determined that when the Kissimmee Police Department finally relented and authorized the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to conduct an investigation, that investigation was compromised from the very start. Not only did Chief Holland notify Basaggio about the criminal investigation, but he was also shown the final report before prosecutors reviewed it, allowing him to tamper with witnesses. The grand jury's investigation also highlighted broader issues in the department regarding training deficiencies. Although designated as, quote, critical incident trained, none of the officers on scene in the Basaggio use of force matter recognized the victim was experiencing a mental health crisis. Additionally, officers entering the victim's home were unaware that this warrantless entry violated clear legal standards. The grand jury found that this demonstrates an insufficient understanding of search and seizure laws, and they are calling for enhanced training for all KPD officers in crisis management, search and seizure, and proper investigative procedures. The grand jury is also requesting that the Kissimmee Police Department update its policies to define when criminal investigations are warranted, when an officer is being investigated internally, and require confidentiality in internal affairs investigations. The grand jury found that the Kissimmee Police Department policies lack clear guidelines for when to initiate criminal investigations following a use of force incident. Basaggio's conduct was initially reviewed by a corporal who approved it despite clear wrongdoing. Moreover, KPD officers openly discussed the internal investigation once it began, violating clear rules of confidentiality. The grand jury believes these policy gaps make it harder to ensure proper oversight and contributed to a lack of accountability. The grand jury is also calling for the Kissimmee Police Department's Internal Affairs Department to be restructured and adequately staffed, saying it is currently severely understaffed and lacks the resources required for effective oversight. One individual currently manages a high volume of cases in that section, leaving little time for thorough investigations. The grand jury found the Internal Affairs Department also suffers from frequent turnover and insufficient procedures, resulting in inadequate investigations and poor record keeping. The grand jury concluded that the Kissimmee Police Department also repeatedly failed to comply with Florida law that requires it to report policy violations to the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission. The grand jury found approximately 10 instances where sustained policy violations went unreported to the commission and spanned multiple chiefs' administrations. The grand jury discovered a pattern of labeling excessive force incidents as mere policy failures rather than specifying actual misconduct, suggesting possible intent to avoid the mandatory reporting. Reminder that this reporting allows the commission to ensure that law enforcement officers who are disciplined, resign, or are terminated by one agency cannot simply get a job with another agency without the second agency knowing of the wrongdoing. Finally, the grand jury believes the integrity of the Kissimmee Police Department is further undermined by instances of dishonesty during the investigation into Basaggio's use of force. The grand jury found clear evidence indicating that some officers who are still employed with the Kissimmee Police Department were either not forthcoming or outright lied during interviews and testimony before the grand jury, raising serious concerns with the grand jury about the department's credibility.
The grand jury wants to make it clear that they recognize the Kissimmee Police Department is full of honest, hardworking law enforcement officers and are dedicated public servants. In no way should these findings call into question the integrity of those KPD police officers and staff working to do the right thing and serve the public. However, the grand jury feels obligated to bring their concerns to the public and the city of Kissimmee so that these matters can be resolved. We thank the grand jury for their time and for careful consideration of the evidence presented to them and these findings and recommendation. The police department and the city of Kissimmee would like to acknowledge the city, taking some certain steps to mediate these actions. The city has already started taking swift actions to address concerns, including accepting the recommendation that two Kissimmee police officers, accepting the resignation of two Kissimmee police officers, including Chief Betty Holland, appointing a member of the Orange County Sheriff's Office command staff as an interim Kissimmee police chief, requesting that the Orange County Sheriff's Office conduct internal investigations into the 11 current and former Kissimmee police officers whose truthfulness or conduct were called into question during the investigation. Once our office receives the results of all those investigations, we will then look into our Brady identification system and to comply with Florida law. The Kissimmee Police Department also corrected its failure to report the IA investigations, referring them to the presentment and reported them to Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission. They are in the process of restructuring the IA department and increasing staffing, including hiring an IA manager. They have also begun to work and provide training for Kissimmee police officers in the areas of crisis management, the duty to intervene, and search and seizure laws. The interim police chief is evaluating the capacity and integrity of the Kissimmee Police Department command staff. The command staff at the Kissimmee Police Department is also working to implement new policies and strengthen existing ones to address the concerns of the grand jury. We look forward to continually to work with the Kissimmee Police Department and the City of Kissimmee to provide a police department that serves the community with integrity, accountability, and trust. Officer Basaggio will continue to move forward in his case through the judicial system, and those court dates are available on the clerk's site. The grand jury's presentment will be uploaded to our website, that's sao9th.com, after this press conference, so that the public may read it in its entirety and understand the transparency that we are trying to create in in our office. I will now take some on-topic questions from you all.
I have read some of that investigation, and none of these things came out in that investigation. How is that possible?
So that's where we talked about early on in the press conference that the investigation was compromised from the very beginning because Officer Basaggio was able to have access to knowing the investigation was going on, and then began to tamper with other witnesses along during that time. So then we went back in and interviewed a lot of those witnesses that were inside of that investigation, and it turned out that many of the things that they stated were falsified.
But shouldn't FDLE have known that? They're investigators too.
I can't speak to what the FDLE, what they should have done. I just know what happened.
And why would 11 people in that department, is there any indication in that grand jury investigation why 11 people would put their careers on the line for this one guy?
I'm going to ask Mr. Williams to step up and answer that question for you.
And in turn, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Wiggins, who's one of our homicide prosecutors who worked on the presentment.
Good morning. Sean Wiggins, Assistant State Attorney. There's no indication on why they all chose to make the decisions that they made through the course of this investigation, but our investigation consistently came across individuals who were listed in that letter that took actions that we felt warranted notifying the department of their conduct through the course of the investigation.
What do you think is the source of this culture of silence that seemed to be so pervasive? A lot of people just trying to nail down this culture of silence. Why?
It's part of the psychology of group thinking, and then you try to, it's one lie, and then you try to cover it up with another lie, and then it just mushrooms into something that we never intended it to be, and that's kind of what happens in the department sometimes. And unfortunately, this is what happened here. But like I said, there are many other departments. There are 22 other ones in this circuit that we work with on a regular basis. That are doing the right thing. They're trying to make their policies better, and looking forward to not covering up for bad cops.
Why do people care? Why? Give us a reason to care with all that's going around.
Well, we should care. I mean, you should care about the quality of the people that are there to protect and serve you. And so that's the whole thing about what we should be looking for in any public servant, is that are they there to do the job, and they're doing it with integrity, accountability, and are they being transparent about what's going on? And when something does go wrong, because look, things are going to go wrong, are you going to step up and be the person that's going to say, hey, this is wrong, we're going to do something about it, we're going to change what's going on, we're going to identify this thing, and we have to make sure that that's what we're going to do as a community, and especially in the law enforcement community.
Well, what's the danger to the public if they don't? What's the danger to the public if they don't?
Well, then you got situations where people are being arrested for things that they may not have been arrested, should have been arrested for. People's rights could be violated, like what happened in this particular case. There are a lot of things that could happen in the course of an investigation or in the course of a case that can cause serious problems for multiple people, including the public.
How many years back did the culture of silence stand? I mean, how many years back did the state attorney's office look?
I think we did at least 10 other episodes by multiple administrations, but I think Mr. Wiggins can give you a more specific answer.
So the incident involving Basaggio and everything that sort of sprung from that obviously began in April of 2023. What you'll see discussed in the grand jury presentment is through the state attorney's investigation, an audit of past initial or IAs or internal affairs investigations was conducted, and then brought to our attention that reports that should have been submitted to the commission that sort of tracks officer misconduct were never submitted. We know that those reports date back to at least the prior administration that was in charge of the Kissimmee Police Department.
Is there anything you can do about that now? Can you unring that bell?
Well, I think as the state attorney discussed, the city of Kissimmee and the new leadership at the Kissimmee Police Department, once these issues were brought to light, have taken steps to now do the right thing and make the reports that should have been made originally.
What is your message to the there's a deep, profound lack of trust now. I want to know what's your message to viewers that will be watching this story today. What's your message to the victim's family as well? And of course, what's your message to the KPD chief who resigned?
Well, I'll stick with what's my message to the public, because the grand jury presentment procedure that we put in place is for the public. Is for the transparency of what goes on in our office and our investigations for the public. And I would tell them that despite this incident, like I said, there are 22 other agencies that are inside of our community that are doing the right thing, that are doing the job correctly, and they shouldn't lose confidence in those agencies. But when something does happen, you got to step up and say that it's wrong. And as many times I've spoken to you all, my administration is not going to turn a blind eye to anyone, whether they are police officers, politicians, regular people in the public, rich, poor, it doesn't matter, whatever ethnic or religious background. We're not turning a blind eye to wrongdoing in our community. Sorry. You. Yes, ma'am. So once the procedure has been sent, to the commissions and trainings, the training standards and commission training, that they will review it. They will look at the certification for that officer. Those names have already been forwarded to our office for Brady review, and so we're working through that procedure right now.
Right. Can I ask you a question? The circumstances under which Sean Pastor being arrested, I mean, what caused him that?
There was a report of a disturbance, and when Officer Basaggio arrived on scene, and this is all captured on body-worn camera, there were articles of clothing and other items throughout the driveway. At one point, Officer Basaggio actually tells one of his other officers that there's a chance they need to do some sort of mental health check. So they did not take action on his mental health crisis, even though there's evidence that they were aware that one was going on.
And then they did what?
And then at least one of them proceeded to use excessive force while the other two watched.
Did they go in with no warrant to go in the building? I mean, did they go
Mr. Kastner refused to come out of his home, which at that point he had a right to do, and the officers followed him into the home without a warrant, and that's where the use of force occurred.
what did they do exactly?
Again, this is on body-worn camera. Andrew Basaggio went around to the front of Sean Kastner while two other officers, one each, had a hold of his arms behind him, and Andrew Basaggio delivered two knee strikes, taking his knee and putting it in Sean Kastner's face, resulting in trauma to Mr. Kastner's face. He was then tased 7 times in his living room.
Any reason given throughout this investigation as to why he did it? Was he resisting? Was Kastner resisting?
Mr. Kastner was resisting under the law and under KPD policy, but his level of resistance did not come close to warranting the force that was used.
What force should have been appropriate?
Less.
So I want to get this correct for the law, for legal purposes. You are allowed to resist an unlawful arrest. So if somebody's unlawfully in your house, like this particular instance where law enforcement was unlawfully in your home, you're allowed to lawfully resist them without violence, which is what happened. So everything that Mr. Castro did on that night, at that point, was legal underneath the law. And them being inside of his house, putting hands on him, was the problem.
Why do you think the chief and gave this light sentence, kind of turned the other way? Why do you think they did that?
You have to speak with former Chief Holland about that.
Mr. Bain, speaking to the chief, having to watch back that body camera video, what was your reaction when you watched that back and you saw what was happening in Kissimmee, when you realized this culture of silence? How did your office react?
We started asking questions. So when it was brought to my attention that this was something that was going on, that came about early on in my administration last year, we started asking for those criminal investigations. Unfortunately, we were kind of being stonewalled for a while until they relented and allowed for a criminal investigation to even start at that point. So we immediately, when we saw it, we knew it was wrong. We knew something would need to be done, and so we went forward to start taking action to make that happen.
What are the next steps now? I know that they're having a press conference here taking at 1 p.m., but what are the next steps after this?
So they'll be able to address a little bit more what I read to you a little bit earlier, whereas their things that they have done, they've taken it on the interim chief from Orange County Sheriff's Office. Orange County Sheriff's Office is doing the internal investigations related to those 11 officers, and they started changing their policy. So those are all things that you got to talk to them about once they have their press conference this afternoon. All right, thank you.
Have you found that any of this, I guess, this indecisiveness or lack of clarity, is that compromised any other cases that have prompted your office to look into any other cases that may have been compromised?
I don't believe so right now. Obviously, it's still open and ongoing in some ways. As to Mr. Osceola, his case is going forward, and so they're going to be, obviously, the investigations need to be continued and completed by the Sheriff's Office, and we'll be in a better position to answer that question later on. All right, thank you all. Have a great day.
Or, sir, the grand jury, they did a deep dive on
Thank
this.
you all.
What does that tell you? They were motivated to get to the bottom of this.
They did a great job, and we're